Hello. Hello, and welcome to the Wonkette live chat. I am Robyn Pennacchia, and this is the lovely and talented Stephen Robinson back from his very exciting vacation in which he left me all by myself for 2 weeks.
Yes. But you and Jamie did a great job.
Oh, for sure. Oh, no, I was just talking in general. I
In
missed you.
general, yes. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I missed you as well. I think we were still communicating.
Yes,
In
I know. I'm
weird,
just kidding. Stephen, I'm just busting your balls.
but yes, we were. I did miss you as well. Because it was a long time away. Now it's like the middle of July. It's like just
I know. And I'm going back to Chicago on Wednesday. I'm very, very happy about that. So, because I miss all of my peoples.
Yeah, it reminds me of the Modern
So,
Family joke where the person's like, "She's going to Chicago." It's like, "Oh, the musical," and he's like, "No, the actual city is a musical." Though you would be a great go to hell kitty. Um,
yes.
I would. That's what I would cast you in. We do have some theater news regarding my obsessive uh, my obsessive desire to know more about the whole funny girl.
It's freaking fascinating. Like, I actually, what I really do like is the fact that like it's got all these people who truly do not generally give a shit about Broadway, being like, let's hear what these people think. Like or I mean, not really, but like being interested in stuff that's going on Broadway, which is actually a thing that um, sort of used to be the case, right? Like, they used to always, put out the drama that happened on Broadway, and then it like, sort of got a little bit more sterilized or whatever, and you didn't hear as much hot gossip or hot behind the scenes gossip or anything. And now it is a very interesting story.
Yes.
So I was completely wrong. And Leah Michelle, well,
You were wrong about how so about Leah
I
Michelle.
was wrong, but like I didn't actually think it was gonna be that Leah Michelle was actually gonna take over. I thought it was just like some sort of like, I don't know, like the site that first got it seemed a little like janky to me. So I was like, they could just be making some shit up. I don't know. And it
Yeah.
also seemed a little bit too like full circle, but
I sent you the article about the lady who was it was being presented as being felt being sort of the underdog in the story of like
yeah.
the people being mean to her because of her size. And I obviously am appreciative of that larger context, but
I
from
don't think this is the thing. I am the person who will make that act like or will go to that well if that well is at all available.
but dramatically
Um,
that's not what's happening. Dramatically it seemed like from I've read how many movies, books, plays have you seen where it's almost like Singing in the Rain, right? It's like here's a
yeah,
talented person or any talented people, and we have the person whose either parents bought them into the role or who does not should not have
it's a
this
thing
role.
that people always get annoyed by. But here's the thing. People don't mind a little nepotism here and there if like what turns out is really like what happens is really good. For instance, Ms. Whitney Houston,
Mm-hmm.
her her cousin was Dionne Warwick, her like godmother was Darlene Love. Is anyone mad that Whitney Houston possibly benefited from some nepotism? No, because we got Whitney Houston out of the deal.
Yeah.
And I think this is the thing. I think that Beanie Feldstein is great. I think it was mean to put her in a role where she couldn't sing the part, and it bothers me.
Yeah.
Like
Well,
it's
a lot of the stories were about kind of that being the case. It was just like, well, if you're not, and I feel bad, but I've told this story before. When I worked at Victor Victoria, and I really got in a sort of relief in this. So the great Rachel York, who I adore, was at the time playing the role of Norma Cassidy, who Leslie Ann Warren had played in the film, and she was brilliant, like
yeah.
blowing the doors off. And one night she's not in the show; she was doing something else, and I had kind of broke my breaks out to kind of like, okay, well, I can go take this break. I'll come back. And literally, I come back and the show's over, and I'm terrified. I go to my boss, like, oh my God, I'm so sorry, I missed the end of the show. What happened? And my lovely boss, Marjorie, she comes over. She's like, honey, when Roxanne's in the show, there are no laughs. It's like 20 minutes shorter.
Yeah.
And it's brutal to hear because Roxanne was also in the show with Ray. Like, she knows here's what would happen. Here's when the audience goes crazy and the show stops. And here's what I do, and it's crickets. And that's brutal. You feel bad about it. But also, she's playing a valuable role, as we've now determined post-COVID.
Yeah.
Understudies keep the show going on. And
Exactly.
that's we get it. But you're top of the line, lady. You're at the top. And to me, when I'm reading, so for me, as someone who's kind of one of my first jobs being front of house, and like when I very much appreciated when Liza Minnelli came in and when, because Julie Andrews was like, had throat problems, was very sick, and was like, is this show going to have to close? And me and
sorry, I get really emotional about Liza Minnelli. I do. I'm not even kidding.
Came in, and like for a lot of people, it's like, oh, thank God we were going to lose our jobs.
Yeah.
And for her to, I'm less empathetic of the hard luck story about, oh, it's so, oh, how sad it is for me. It's like, you are at the top of the line. And Julie had that. Julie was coming on with serious throat problems. That was the last show she was able to do before she just couldn't sing.
Yeah.
But she understood. She was coming in exhausted from. She understood, if I'm not there, if I don't do this, if I can't go away for a month, the show won't survive. And these people are going to lose their jobs. Not just cast, not just cast, crew, the goofy kid in the front selling programs, they lose their jobs. And so for me, it's just this sense of, this isn't just about you wanting to perhaps play a role that you probably aren't cast for. This is on your back. And so whenever
it wasn't fair to the people in the show. I'm also like, the thing that I really just personally have an issue with is, like, aside from the fact that I think that there were musicals that she would have been great in, that didn't necessarily involve that level of being able to sing. It felt weird that it was like, here's this very nice person who is very talented in a lot of ways in a role that does not work for her, but that everyone knows, the only person anyone knows can do this, I mean, I think a lot of people can do it, but famously can do this, is this person that everyone kind of knows is an asshole. Like, so it put everyone in a very awkward position. And I think that's, like, I don't think a lot of people, necessarily wanted it to go this way. I think a lot of people wanted Beanie to be successful. I personally had heard her sing before and was like, I don't know that is the voice for this part.
Well, Michelle, she had like always wanted this. I think Ryan Murphy had at one point.
So did I.
Leah
Michelle, yeah. Sorry.
Had, like, since Spring Awakening and whatever, she had blown the doors off at the Tonys and all of this. So in a weird way, it winds up being this whole thing of like, well, a lot of jerks. Like, maybe she was bad. Maybe she could learn, because a lot of the anti-cancel culture thing is like, why don't we give second chances? Why it's not? But like, again, if you are in theater, you are perhaps accustomed to the stories of the talented jerk. But ultimately, I would probably, if my livelihood depended upon the person above the title, maybe the jerk who's talented, doors open, as opposed. And a lot of that stuff is like, okay, I don't even know if that's why she didn't get the role or not. As you said, everyone wants this role. Like, again, my Instagram.
It's like every, especially like if you have a range like mine, like I have like a contralto through mezzo range because I'm crazy, but like that is like the ultimate part. Even though like the book isn't that great, but like the songs are like the absolute best. It's like the actual best role that, and it's a thing that everyone wants, and they never did it because no one can live up to Barbara.
And my Instagram's probably unique to a lot of people, but it's a bunch of theater folks, one including Marcy Richardson, who is wonderful. She's sort of an opera singer in New York and does burlesque and dancing. She's wonderful. And she was sort of, at one point, had a video of herself singing that don't rain on my parade, and then wonderful. Like there's tons. You could go anywhere and find so many people who
There are, and that, what
talented.
sort of annoys me is I actually have never liked the whole like talented jerk thing, because there are so many like I did theater, so there are so many incredibly like kind and great people who don't who are like also talented, and I don't really like that thing, especially because I think to some degree it makes people think that if they want to be, at least like, years ago, if you want to be successful, you have to be like this, you have to be, like what's her face in Valley of the Dolls.
Yes, and that's and I should clarify, that's sort of like if you grow up watching, say, all about Eve and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
In reality, my experience is that a lot of, not to name drop, but having worked in front of people like BB New Earth, Karen Ziemba,
BB New Earth is a true hero to women with overly deep voices.
Incredibly nice and kind to the staff, and not just to the people they have to be, like to just in front of a house. They better than when I would later go into corporate world, and some of these people who are C-level would spit at you to look at you, but these are stars, and they really have that sense of we're all in this as a team,
and that's awesome. And I do also think that people should be given second chances to grow and change, and because otherwise we do need that lesson to exist for other people in the world. I think I don't like the idea that people are stuck with being an asshole forever, because I know that I have had my own asshole moments that were not necessarily like being mean to people or anything, but I said like, I don't know.
Well, it doesn't hold up. So generally, because people are humans, right? So what's really you're doing is trying to use the cancel term, you're trying to cancel people you don't like, and inevitably, you will be proven to be a hypocrite like 5 months later, because your favorite, either politically or artistically, will make a mistake, and then you will be like, oh well, maybe Louis C.K. is not so bad as this person whose work I didn't like, and so forth, and it's just, look, why don't we just say, maybe in certain areas you won't, like rape, Bill Cosby should be in prison forever, but there are certain aspects of like, someone's an asshole, let them do something, apologize, make amends. In this case, it was ridiculous. I mean, the stuff I read, this is a show that needed two things to happen, especially with Broadway now. You either need a great name to bring people in and to keep it going, or like with Hamilton, a show that's so great it can kind of, you just need people who can sell the roles. It's written. Funny Girl was never like a Hamilton. It was always going to be.
It never was. No, like the book was. I'm sure Beanie would have been fantastic if there were no music in it and it was like a better play. Like, I think that would be great. I just don't. For a musical, especially like that, I just want to hear people sing. Like, I don't.
Oh yeah, and the reviews, when the reviews came out, and it's just like there's articles about like how do we advertise this, because anything positive is not about the lead. So it's just sort of like, well, this is, I mean, and it's unfortunate because it's Tony's, the gentleman who played Eddie, and I'm geeky enough that Who Taught Her Everything's one of my favorite songs from that, and it's a great between Eddie and Mom, and
he's fabulously talented.
He's amazing. I hope that he does well in this, or the chance that people can get him some sight through that. I mean, to bring this back to politics in a way, I do think that sense of cancelization, of like you are done or forever, has been a problem politically, specifically on the left, of just stating of like, you're the worst person ever. Either you voted for Trump.
I think people have gotten overly harsh and overly vitriolic in a way that is not necessarily helpful. A little vitriol is like good sometimes, especially if it's righteous. But if it keeps going on, people feel sour, like.
And along those lines, it comes of, this is actually something TV related. we had just met, and I think one of the things we had a very intense argument about was Roseanne being a Trump supporter. And I was in lines of believing it. You'd written a very great piece about like this is, you know, you felt very strongly about that not being the case. It's interesting because I to look at that in the context of some of the election, I do sense there was a sense of
Wait, hold on. No, I knew that Roseanne was a Trump supporter.
Roseanne on the show, Roseanne
Oh,
Connor.
Roseanne on the show. Okay, yeah, the character of Roseanne on the show. Yeah.
Really did not. And I thought I could see that in the sense if you take this idea of, and I get that you did not believe that Roseanne would fall for a lot of Trump's, like, I'll bring you every new job back and here's all my stuff. But I do think this idea of from and going back to a lot of the 2016 stuff, I don't want to relitigate that. It was a sense of obviously voting for us as Democrats is the right moral thing to do. You are a racist, horrible person if you don't. And that's it. And no matter what, you've commented about the economic anxiety thing where people would eye roll, like, oh, it's like, well, no, these people had job like someone.
But there are also Democrats who suffer from economic anxiety. And I think like, especially because, oh my God, like you're like getting phone calls from, you know, credit card companies and stuff. That is anxiety inducing. And, you know, honestly, even like the phrase just makes me go like, just because like, yeah, I've totally had like a horrible anxiety over those kinds of things. And you don't, I think that it's tough because I get what people mean by it, but I think that if you only hear part of it, the person saying it sounds like an asshole in a way that I don't think they intended.
A lot of people at the riots and a lot of people at Trump rallies were obviously financially well off to go to rallies or to go to travel to go to those things, but that doesn't reflect everyone at these. And you've made the good argument about sometimes what is your goal to it when insulting people? Because to me, it's like I think an important thing that Democrats should think about when looking at an election is you hit people. And so even in a weird way, when there's this criticism of like the worst thing that could you ever do would be to say something bad about John McCain or John Lewis. And that had potentially happened from the left and the right. And my sense is that these are grassroots politics, people who had in their past obviously suffered greatly for their country, but now they are both powerful people who are doing well. And they can probably handle assholes saying jerky things about them. What is probably worse is to attack individual voters so that voters are dumb, racist, stupid, idiots. Where are you going there? Because
I don't think that
like, I agree, I'm terrible. Let me go vote for you. Yeah. No one does that.
Well, I think that like the, you know, general desire is for people to say like, oh, wow, I didn't realize that I was stupid or, you know, sexist or racist for this particular thing that I am doing. I will change. And I get that. I do, because I have a temper. So I get that. My temper is very much more under control than it once was. My earrings are staying on, but like, I think that there's this idea that if you really, really berate people, then other people won't want to be berated like that. And they won't want to be in that club with that person. So I get that. Like, they're like, okay, then I'll just, you know, go with what this person's saying because I don't want to be attacked like that. And it works to a degree, but I think sometimes it gets to the point where people just feel tired and just can't, like, I like, for me, some stuff is just like so constant and so mean that I'm just, as a person, feeling sour, and I don't like to feel sour towards people that I would generally agree with.
The sort of the BS stuff is it's never true. Like whenever you are, and I feel like there's a lot of white folks on the left who are this kind of thing of like, well, yeah, this country's obviously terribly racist and all white people racist. Obviously not me. It's like, okay, well, how are you better than all these people? It's like they seem to love whenever, not even just black men, but white men say the most misogynistic stuff to women. Like, I don't care. To me, I hate the Karen stereotypes. And I hate because when you're just any excuse to be like, oh, this woman, I don't like what this woman wrote, so I'm gonna say that she is this um spoiled Veruca Salt. I'm gonna just basically, it's no different from like, to me, you're saying, I don't like what Stephen wrote. Here's every awful black person stereotype I can unleash on him. It's just kind of gross. And whenever
But
someone
one thing I think is always worth being suspicious of, I think, is like when something sort of gives people permission to be super sexist, or to say or to be racist in a way that they feel is righteous, like when people would make fun of Donald Trump for being fat. And and then they're like, this is my time. I can finally do it. I've been holding this in. And that's the feeling that I always get, especially with like a lot of like men who feel that they can that they're like, instead of criticizing what the woman is saying, going for stuff like, oh, she's a Karen, which I don't think I'm not that bothered by it, honestly.
Well, yeah, but it's like, what's the point? Like, also the Veruca Saltness, or saying that it's a tantrum. It's like a lot of sexist stereotypes, and of like, dude, why did you go in this direction? And it's like, and it's interesting. I totally get why, if you're a black person specifically, it feels like, oh, and I've been lectured by many a white person who did not have the background that I might have in a or whatever. But at the same time, in the world, again, as a writer, the person who comes off as a jerk is I have a degree in this and blah, blah, blah. I obviously know more than you. And so whenever you're kind of like, it doesn't change. To me, I'm still the jerk. It's not so much a racial thing. If you have every right to, I've tweeted something and you respond of like, well, no, I don't think we should, handle the homelessness issue this way. Here's my theory. I disagree with you. And I was like, well, obviously, by your disagreeing with me because I have an MF in public policy and blah, 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 you're a racist who doesn't respect my background. This makes you seem like a jerk. And I feel like there's a lot of that. I feel like that is, and it's unfortunate. I mean, as Nietzsche said, people often who most kind of crow their credentials are often coming from a space of insecurity. Like, if you tell your rights, you must have them. So it's like it's a weird kind of sense of that. I see a lot of that going on, as opposed to just, you need to be able to respect the fact that people are going to disagree with you without trying to make it this. Because as you said, what are you trying to achieve? If you're just if the whole counter from it is like, I've made people believe that I'm an asshole, the candidate I stand for, that doesn't make them in a positive light.
Yeah, it really doesn't. Like, I didn't like it. I don't like it when people do it with candidates that I happen to like. Like, I'm like, why would you do that? I want people to like them. It's just very counterintuitive to me. And like, again, I understand feeling vitriolic and I understand being angry. It's literally our job to be angry for everything for the most part. But I think it's more effective to get angry at politicians, like pundits who actually have power, and issues, just like general issues, rather than just being like, I really hate this particular group of people, because unless you're like, this is hopeless, these people are never going to change at all, and they're never going to, vote with us or anything like that. That I think is it's different, That's a very different thing than like, well, these are people that we think should vote the way that we do. or agree with us on something, and instead of like just explaining why, or even like answering their questions or whatever, you're just like, you're stupid.
Well, and
And I
every
just,
white, a lot of white liberals, a lot of who have this
mhm.
position, they have relatives who are Trump supporters. They have,
Yeah,
there's just a lot. It's not, statistically highly probable that they do. And so the average, you're not helping. You're basically saying this person's loved one is irredeemable and terrible. They might
yeah,
have, who knows, but more often than not, you're just it's better to be like, this person, these policies are bad and do not help, especially
yeah,
as in a weird way. I don't think that we have effectively convinced the nation that Republicans are inherently racist and evil. Game over. In other words, it's like we still have to sell our own policies and our own,
yeah,
do it in a way that we kind of connect with why they believe. And I think I'll just bring up something that someone had said, like, how do we.
yeah. I was looking at that one as well. It's
And
interesting.
well, the challenge there is we presume that anyone, and I've seen this, like, how could any woman or person with a uterus vote for Republicans? They are just, and to come up with like, well, calling them Aunt Lydia's isn't, how does that get you to either understanding where they're voting or what their voting issue is, or how to address that? Like, what is the actual gain? I feel like a lot of people just want to be smug, and I see it everywhere in social media. I see it in our own comments. Like, I get it, you just want to be smug, you want to
Well,
feel
it feels good.
to people,
It's
and help
it does. It feels good to people. Like,
it's not going to get you anywhere. uh,
no.
you need to figure out like why. And so there's a lot of that denial. I would see, like, okay, well, we've seen that pattern. People right now, if they have trouble paying their rent, they're going to blame Democrats, the party in power. That tends to how it works. And the response is, they are idiots. They should understand, or they should take a civics class. It's like, okay, well, look, I mean, these are people, you aren't making this sell. You are just coming across as arrogant and, you need to be, well, here's how we can fix this. Some humility.
The thing that sucks about humans is that you can be super fucking correct and right about something, but if you are an asshole, people don't want to hang around with you. Like it's just sort of the way that people work. Much like, Ellen Dershowitz, like, people.
That was hilarious. I loved your piece about this with your trigger warning about the surrender.
I can't have the conversation again. Like, there are certain conversations that I'm not like, it's like the first time, fine. The second time, fine. Even like, there are even conversations where I'm like, I agree with people, but I just can't do this again. Like, just,
I'm going to enjoy this movie. And yes, this person you might not like is in it, but so forth.
yeah.
But yeah, so can you walk through people who might not have read your article? And it's the
Oh,
first.
you know what? I haven't. Give me 1 second. I'm just going to go to the page real quick, because I think, if anything, this deserves a dramatic reading. Picture it.
Sicily.
Sicily. I'm kidding. Like, I was trying to think of where the guy was. Picture it. A beach in Alan Dershowitz's imagination.
Oh,
hello, Mr. Dershowitz. This is not a question, but a comment. I bought your book from Amazon titled The Case for Liberalism in the Age of Extremism, or Why I Left and Can't Join the Right. Whew, which is an exhausting title if ever there was one. My first comment is that I find it very easy reading and easy for me to understand. The other thing I would like to mention to you is something that I've never, ever experienced in my life, in my entire life. I was reading your book yesterday at the beach when some guys who I was playing beach volleyball with asked me about the book that I was reading. I imagine this was happening like whatever, spike. Is that like mid spike? That's a volleyball thing. So I showed them the book. They then asked me why I chose this book. And so I told them that I had a great deal of respect for the author, like a normal person says in conversation regularly. The next thing that happened came as a total shock to me. Without warning, I was slugged and punched in the face. I asked why that was called for, and I was told it's because his political viewpoint and mine differ. I told them that I get it that our viewpoints differ, but why can't we at least be civil about it? With that, he laughed, shoved me once again on the sand, and kicked sand all over me. My question to you, Alan Dershowitz, is why people can have political differences. He said can, I'm not can't. It doesn't make sense. Respect others' point of view and just be civil about it. Honest to goodness, this is the very first time I have experienced such an incident, and I would appreciate it if you can tell me what I did to deserve this. Because honestly, I just don't get it. I was taught by my stepmom, also a movie starring Sarandon.
Yes, I really
to always be respectful of others, even though I may not agree with the other person. I thought I was being myself and honest. I don't know, Mr. Dershowitz. I just don't get on why I got and deserve this kind of treatment. Thank you kindly, Mr. Dershowitz, and I look forward to hearing from you so that I can understand better. Like,
oh man, so
I love this. I love this.
Reversal of Fortune is one of my favorite movies, and I loved Dershowitz in the movie, even though I personally, Jeremy Irons' Klaus Van Bülow was sort of a model for me as a young man. I was like, how could I be more like Klaus Van Bülow without eventually killing my wife? But like just the charm. So, but my God, Alan Dershowitz, that well, obviously this doesn't happen, right? Like this is just insane.
Yeah, no, there's no way that it's happened. Honestly, my personal opinion is that someone was trolling his ass.
Oh yeah. It does seem like
that sounds like something that I would write as a joke, or you would write as a joke, to be like, I'm gonna fuck with you, Alan Dershowitz.
That I wrote, but he's so needy. He was upset that he's not invited to
party. Gary, I would say, like.
Exactly, Gary writes on Fridays for us. Well, the weird thing is that whenever Dershowitz or others will talk about some mythical time where everyone was civil about their political disagreements, they had no disagreements. Like, you know, if you like all Tories in Victorian England hung out together, like, it was, you know, everyone
you weren't actually interacting with people who disagreed with you all that much.
And generally you would get, you know, completely like a scandal literally was like you got divorced. Like the difference of like, oh, this person might possibly be queer. They're like, you know, so I mean, basically the controversial letter, like in the whatever in Dorian Gray, it's like I will print this letter would just be that, you know, Alan Dershowitz had supported Trump, like in this community. Yes, he's excommunicated. He's upset. He had he had said, like, how could I not be? No one's more Jewish, or probably like, how could I not be invited to this party?
To the Jewish Democrats ball? Like, yeah.
You say, of course, do Rocky Horror.
I vote yes.
Obviously.
You know what? And if you do it, I promise you guys, I will grace you all in the next day's chat with my like very on point Little Nell impersonation. I do a really good Columbia. Shockingly, I was actually Columbia in the Shadowcast, not Magenta. You would think so because of the hair, but
I would see you as Columbia, an excuse to tap dance, right?
Yes. Well, that was it. Also, at the time, I had a pixie cut, which we will not discuss ever.
I plan to, if I can. A friend of mine who had worked on a previous production in Seattle was going to do Rocky Horror, and they were told they could not because they were essentially there was this outcry from, I think, the trans community in Seattle that they, who's non-binary, should not do Rocky Horror it should be done by a trans woman. And a lot of this is somewhat frustrating. But what is sort of weird about, because Rocky Horror is of a time, but
Yeah.
what is interesting, and it came up recently when Laverne Cox was cast as Frank,
Who I think did an amazing job. I'd like.
but it was. I might disagree with you there, but my sense there was that it is this view that this is sort of a trans story, that Frank is a trans person or trans woman, and there's controversy over how to approach this, specifically because Frank is not particularly a good person. It's a villain, though I always took Rocky Horror as essentially commenting on the previous sense of the queer villain, whereas in movies, queerness was hint. So essentially, the idea
Yeah.
of a queer villain, we're just going to have that person embraced. It's fully queer.
I mean, personally, I felt that he was the hero of the story. But I really love Tim Curry.
You support murdering, because you would murder someone who upstaged you, as Meatloaf did, and you would and then you would serve him to other people.
I mean, yes, I was talking on Twitter today about how I knew that it was over with my ex when I went to a party at his friend's house and they played Celebrity and no one knew who Tim Curry was. And I was like, these are not my people. I can't do this anymore. And then I watched Moonstruck and I was like, confirmed, this is not what I'm doing anymore. But sorry, I'm a little off today.
How could you not, either from Rocky Horror, Clue, in the 90s, he was everywhere, and Swalwell Park, he was in, and then, but
I didn't understand it. I was just like, I'm sorry, these are clearly not my people. I don't know what to do with this anymore. And I love Tim Curry. Did you know that he covered my favorite Joni Mitchell song?
Yeah, I think did you send me a clip about? Yeah,
probably.
He's astonishing. He was also a childhood hero of mine. I loved it before. He was a great Captain Hook and now 30 years ago cartoon. Who also a hero of mine. It's unfortunate that he is he is recovering from a very serious stroke and cannot perform anymore, and he was always I've always been a huge fan.
I always like villains is the thing. Like I'm so pro villain for the most part.
Well, that's been a challenge. Like, I think villain roles are great, and I feel there's this sort of, I don't like to use the term dismissively, but PC or woke sense of like, oh, well, if this Black character or woman or whatever is a villain, that's wrong. And it's like, well, villains are great roles, and it's sort of a weird thing of like, I don't think that Chicago is misogynistic because the women are evil,
No.
Or they're understood or whatever. It's interesting. No one is particularly morally upstanding in that. But I find it's fun to be a villain. And what you want to balance is a world where and Jen Richards, the trans actress, had commented on this, of how when she came out, someone's like, oh, like Buffalo Bill from Science of Lamps. And that's devastating because that is
a horrifying thing to say to anyone. Jesus.
But the idea is that, okay, well, you could have this character, but maybe you need other characters, other examples. So the idea is more diversity. It's like more types of roles, more types of things. I tend to follow of Harvey Weinstein of like, yeah, I'm all for the sissy part and all of this part, as he called it, but visibility at all costs. But let us do more things and different things. And so, yeah, I kind of regret that sense of sort of like, oh, everyone has to sort of be this specific thing right now.
Yeah, because it's not that, like, at least when I was acting, like, I didn't ever want to play like, ingenues. I'm like, no one's going to cast me as an ingenue anyway. Like, my theater teacher was like, this is not the direction that you're going to go in at all, which is fair. And she had a very good point. But and she was like, hey, when I was like 16, people are gonna be like, oh, you're definitely playing Mama Rose. So people just, are certain types. I am clearly not an ingenue type. I am the crazy bitch or, the funny best friend, and I'm fine with that. I don't think that ingenue roles in general are that exciting.
Mm-hmm.
And I say ingenue, but just like, I don't like, people talk a lot about there's, oh, the partly bad hero, especially for men and everything like that. Like what am I trying to think of? There's a term and I can't think of it right now.
Mm-hmm. Anti-hero?
Yeah, the anti-hero thing. And I don't think that that's as bad as some people think it is. Like, I actually, like, to some degree, I can see where it's been toxic, but also I freaking love a good female anti-hero. Like, that's really my ideal always in terms of media.
Oh yeah, my friend Benji and I in college were big fans of The Last Seduction, and we were just like watching that and going like, "Oh my god, she's awesome!" Because she's just like, Linda Fiorentino in this femme fatale, and sort of kicking ass. I love Sharon Stone and Basic Instinct for that. It's a sort of a good, and they're sort of anti-villains more than anti-heroes, but the I think that diversity of in a performer in Seattle, Butch Alice, a drag performer, has done some Christmas shows for the theater and Cafe Nordo that I've worked for, and they're great because it's sort of the flip on ingenue, because the idea of reclaiming the concept of innocence. So it would take, say, someone like yourself and put you in a world where you are the innocent person against all these weirdos, the weirdos being could be normies or something. And it's that, and I find that fascinating, right? It's a way of flipping it and looking at a different way. And it's like, this person gets to be the straight person, pun intended, and in a way they normally are not. Because a lot of the criticisms is like, generally it's the normal person in a world where they go in, it's like to New York, San Francisco, and the joke is just, oh, look at all these weird queer people or weird Black people or weird, everyone is, the whole joke is how everyone is different from the white Christian. And the idea is to flip that and have the ingenue be.
And that's interesting and awesome. Like, I love that idea.
In a world of Ted Cruz's. So Ted Cruz, you've said this to me, is going after the same and what, but I find that weird because he is, his marriage should not be legal. Like, every time I look at him, I'm like, should this be allowed? Is this like culturally correct and right that Ted Cruz is like, especially as he's still got the beard.
I'll tell you something in a second.
Shouldn't his wife have just one job? My wife got me to cut my rubbish beard off within a few weeks of our meeting, because we met in the time I was full on with the idea of the
Did you have a goatee?
I had a full beard, and which is a man's way of saying I've given up. And but it was well trimmed. I trimmed it. I had, it was a good beard. It was still rubbish. It was full and still black because I was much younger, and my hair behaved when it came back into my when it grew back. But my wife still.
I will say I'm opposed to white guy beard specifically because only if I'm making out with them. Because like, it's really like rough hair. I don't like it. It ends up giving me like a weird skin thing. I don't like it. So.
I don't get how that, but like it was evidence that I was not prepared to meet the woman I love at that moment. But I was like, what the hell? And I was still dating with it, but it was like, generally speaking, the man who's dating with the beard is like, I don't expect this to go anywhere because I'm leaving the house voluntarily with a beard. And I don't expect that. But I was doing this when I stopped me. But Cruz has this. It's awful. And it's like, just get rid of it. But he believes that he can kind of dictate what couples do or what's right. And there's this hunger, right? That he has this, all these folks who have this hunger, like even Clarence Thomas' decree of like, we're coming for all.
Yeah.
a pair, one would hope, again, my marriage.
Well, because what they want, what they're doing is at the same time as they're going, you're all ridiculous, this will never happen, is they're doing that to us and then going, at the same time, mixing up the message by being like, yeah, this shit is totally on the table. This is going. The most
People
evil,
are saying it's impossible it could happen. But like, wait a minute, my son is 8. He was a year old when that ruling came out. Like,
yeah.
why are you acting like at least, I'm, with Roe, I was born somewhat shortly after Roe, but at least like my son is older than marriage equality. So yes, that could possibly end. Like the TV show The Flash is older than marriage equality. So I think it's possible that it is threatened. But maybe ask you something, because I've seen this a lot. So regarding marriage equality, regarding this ruling, and then same with Roe. So folks are very upset with people who point out that there might have been an opportunity to make Roe the law of the land, because it was called the Freedom to Choose Act was, and Obama pursue that. And a lot of the you don't understand civics folks will then come out and say, oh, well, those, it was, there weren't 60 votes for that because there was, all of these, you had more mansions at the time. Okay, fair enough. But isn't that in a way conceding Alito and Kavanaugh's argument that this actually there is no public will for marriage equality, not marriage, for abortion rights in this country? It had to go with liberal activist judges creating the right, but it would never be something that the public would ever actually support. And so my response would be like, well, if the polls are true, why then, like, why show me polls if then, and this happens with we've talked about this, a lot of Democratic things of like, well, the polls show that everyone wants this. Well, no, we don't have the votes for it, or we can't, this will kill us in the next election. And it's like, okay, well then maybe either the polls are wrong or this just isn't popular. So you're saying like after 2008, at the peak of Obama's popularity, he can't, make this happen. And if that's true,
the assumption was that it was, I'm playing devil's advocate here, as I do in like literally every situation in my own head all of the time. Always, it's really fun in here. I think that the assumption was, okay, it's been taken care of by the court, so we don't need that on us. Like, we don't need that controversy on us.
Oh yeah.
I do think it probably would have been easier to do many years ago, even
wasn't
possibly
sexy.
during the Clinton era.
It wasn't sexy. If the right is already there, like giving you, I don't have health insurance, I'm giving you health insurance, is something, as opposed to, oh, you had a constitutional right to abortion and now you have a constitutional right to abortion, is less sexy. As I get that. What is weird, I just will say, what I think when people talk about cynicism around voting or whatever, and again, I get lectured about this is why you have to do this. But Obama spoke to Planned Parenthood in 2007 and said, the first thing I'm doing is signing the Freedom of Choice Act, which again, Pelosi with a Democratic controlled Congress had passed. And if there was just no votes on it, then just say that, right? Or say it's a priority. But I do think like it's just this rule of like, this is stuff we will do, what we don't do. Not only is that perhaps depressing to your Democratic base, it is dangerous because Republicans don't play that game. So Republicans saying, yeah, we're going to come in and we're going to pass the No Queers Can Marry Act, and then we're going to like keep women from traveling across state lines act. We're going to do all of this. You run a risk of everyone, especially non-connected voters who aren't totally in on this sort of thing, being like, oh yeah, people just say stuff, but they don't actually do it. And that's dangerous, because
they actually do it. And this is the thing, I'm going to try and arrange my thoughts here. I don't think that the neutrality thing works very well. And I'm not saying this because I'm, yes, I am I am a radical. I will not make any excuses. I will not, I'm clearly not a moderate. And I don't think that I'm doing the thing where I assume that what I want is going to be the most successful thing. Mm-hmm. Because I think in general, it's better to push for a cause and keep pushing for it and keep pushing for it, even when it's unsuccessful, rather than, okay, we can't do this right now. Let's back away from it for a while until like the coast is a little bit more clear. I don't think it works very well, even if we're talking about causes that are not my causes. Mm-hmm. I think that what the Republicans did with Roe was constantly keep it in the public mind by passing trying to pass all of these crazy ass laws that, made abortion illegal, whether or not it could happen. And I think the fear sometimes with Democrats is, oh, well, if we do this and we fail, then people will be like, oh, you're losers. You couldn't pass this. And I don't think I don't see that actually happening so much. I think that if you try, like a lot of the time when you just try, you get credit. When you make a visible effort, you get the credit.
Yeah.
Even if it doesn't actually work.
And I think I agree. I think my only counter would be that it worked for Republicans. They were generally unified. So it works less when, like with voting rights or abortion, and it's just your two senators like Manchin and Sinema being like, yeah, we'd love to help. Either we don't want to help or raise taxes or help poor people in any way, or we'd love to do something for women's health, but we won't kill the filibuster. That just makes you look silly. And then for, Democrats are in control of things right now. So that's the tough problem. Like they communicate, well, we're not really in control. We're sort of kind of in control, just doesn't register with a lot of voters. You can lecture them, but I find like the average person, that's just not how they are responding to situations or whatever. They just seem, and that's to your point, like DeSantis picking fights, but kind of showing himself as a powerful person has had some impact. And I know Newsom was doing that, and I think
I think is really great and really successful. Like,
and the response from some Biden enablers is like, oh, it's easy for Newsom because he's in California and there's no mansions there, and he has a super majority, and it's like, fine, but just the average person likes to believe that they're electing a leader who can achieve something and make it happen, and that's just a normal human instinct, like because they want to believe that government can help them, and to be told why.
But it's also working for Fetterman. Oh, sorry, I kicked my support thing. It's also working really well for Fetterman, and he's in Pennsylvania, which is at this point kind of a swing state. I will say, I think, even though like I don't agree with him on everything, I think Eric Swalwell is doing a fantastic job in terms of like just promoting himself and what he is personally into, and sort of separating himself from the crowd. And I think he's doing a really good job of it. That is a really good example, I think, of how someone who is not necessarily a radical can still like work a little magic here and there, but
smells not so well as Lauren Boebert, a grown
woman. That doesn't.
I just don't.
See, that's terrible. You want people to make those terrible, mockable comments so that then you can,
Well, and she says that as like, well, he just runs away from me. It's like, well, no, he just doesn't want to be around you because you're a terrible human being.
Because you're unpleasant, and also your restaurant closed.
Well, it just you almost feel so, because she's the character who her actor. Can you imagine? So the Lord, like, and I always love this. So the you get appreciation because the actor's so good at playing the Lauren Boebert awful character. And the first time they're like on an interview, their whole body language is different, and they smile. It's like, oh wow, this person is like so nice, not like that awful person they play. and like you just love, but this is who she is. She's
Yes.
actually a terrible human being.
On like every possible
And
level.
she believes like this, like I calling someone names is I just don't get, and I'm
But
all for humor. I just don't like calling people names. Like
but
that.
it works. So this is the thing. It worked really well for Trump for whatever reason. And so now they're going to keep doing it. And where I do think we have an edge is that like that kind of thing does not last forever. Like it really like yes, it can like rile. It eventually becomes really dorky. I mean, I think it's dorky now personally, but like even for, like it gets tired. People get tired of shit, and eventually, it becomes we make it an embarrassment for them that they're still doing that.
Well, and it's somewhat of a distraction. I should actually focus on the brunt of the gist of what she said, which was that they're going to punish Swalwell once they gain the majority. They're going to strip him of security clearance for some sort of BS China reason, and they will probably do it. I mean, and this goes back to what you're saying. It's like there's all this type of stuff they will actually do, and it is a weird boy who cries wolf thing. People ask like, why don't voters believe Democrats when we talk about all the awful things but it's because like, well, it looks as if it's all politics. And sometimes even
Yeah.
people say, like, I remember Obama was guilty of this, would say it's all, oh, they're just doing politics and not focusing on that they are terrible. There's this weird thing that habit Democrats will have, like on Meet the Press, they'll talk about how, well, the Republicans I talk to, or my colleagues, know that Trump lost the election or know that it's ridiculous. So they almost in a way create this sort of idea that the the people they hang out with, the Senate lunchroom or the House lunchroom, are sane and not doing all these terrible things. But that's not particularly true. I mean, you've noted
Yeah.
the horrible stuff with abortion coming. It is happening. And we've written about how this is a very radical Supreme Court. Like the best case in the argument for, like, from a Roberts perspective, the slow chip away of rights. And Jamie's commented on this. I'm no Roberts fan, but Roberts would be sort of like, okay, you want to slowly, sort of like the frog in the boiling water thing, because you don't want to
Yeah.
throw them into the boiling water. That's messy. And so he would have been like, this is clearly a mess. It's a disaster. Like, women are dying. Like, people are dying because they don't know
Yeah.
how to.
And it's very like already so much horrifying shit is happening.
And this is a radical Supreme Court. Like, if you passed a law that created this level of chaos, you would be, you ideally be voted out of office. These people can't be voted out of office, and God forbid you interrupt their dessert to protest them. But it's vile and it's tough because there's this combination of protectiveness of institutions that Democrats have. Like, so I think it was the Health and Human Services director who was like, "Oh, we can't attack the Supreme Court." Well, why? It's like an inherently radical organization. I know that we just got our first sister on the Supreme Court. It sucks. She kind of move in, and it's a terrible organization. But like, it's awful. This black lady got on the Supreme Court, worked hard her whole life, and the next 30 years is just her writing dissents, being like, "Well, that's fucked up.
Yeah.
That's fucked up." Like that, like that's the next 30 years of this woman. I think she'd be like, she can't say it, but I think Justice Jackson would be like, expand the court, save me. I can't do this for the rest of my life. Like, make it a court that is not just me being, I dissent. This is, yeah. I guess I'm a slave now. Okay. Fucked up. Like it. So this is what this court is doing, and it's hard to, I know the first lady had the sense of like, act somehow the view that people who protest don't vote.
Yeah.
So, but you're someone who's been an activist and has you've always voted. It just seems like that this idea that these people who care enough about politics to protest don't, like, in my experience, people who don't care about politics don't bother. Like they don't do that. They don't. So why is this? Why do you think people have this want to believe
So
this?
I think that there's like sort of a miscommunication in general that is happening. You know, I'm trying to phrase this the right way. A lot of people on like the far left and the left like don't see electoral politics as the only way to achieve like certain aims. Largely because there is the view that like, you know, people in electoral politics don't necessarily want to do the things that we think are a great idea. So it's our job to push them to do those things as much as we can. And, you know, sometimes it takes a while, sometimes it doesn't, but you don't stop pushing for those things just because, oh, okay, it's not the right time in the voting cycle. And so we're not really doing that because we're not necessarily thinking, okay, so how do I arrange caring about the things that I care about in a way that is beneficial to people running for office? And it's sort of, I think that things can be accomplished outside of electoral politics, especially on a, you know, on a local level. And that things are actually accomplished by sometimes criticizing the leaders, because then maybe you convince someone else. And the more people that you convince that the thing you want is a good idea, the more likely it is that things are going to get done. Like, it's just, it's a very, very different way of thinking. And so like, I get that they're like, oh, well, they must not vote if they're like doing stuff other than, if they're placing their faith in things that are not electoral politics.
But you know, isn't it weird that there's a sort of, you know, maybe I'm asking a lot, but it seems as if some of these Democrats, when they talk, act as if they are oblivious to everything Republicans have done in the past 30 years. So, you know, I would think that it's not just, hey, like if you want to ban abortion, go vote for anti-choice candidates. Maybe you don't want to harass women at the most vulnerable point of their lives and stand outside a clinic and shout at them and whatever. That seems really rude and terrible, and maybe that will not help your political gains, but they did that anyway, right? And like, even recently, I think if the argument had been, oh, if you don't like wearing a mask or don't like any, you know, having to get vaccinated or any sort of COVID restrictions, just wait that out, vote in 2020, vote. No, they protested, made a big scene of it, which then it seemed very clearly elevated it. Like you saw politicians go, oh, my supporters don't like this. I was kind of,
yeah,
maybe I should.
and
Maybe,
then they jumped on the train.
maybe we should execute Fauci. I was kind of, I was thinking maybe not, let's not bully the 80-year-old man, public servant, but hey, my supporters like this. Same with like the school boards. Like what made the whole CRT and the school, what made that a big issue was like people yelling at these meetings, not like politely expressing discontent and just saying, well, I don't like what the school board is doing. I just will wait for the next election for the next school board. Like they were going and like really advocating.
You can, like, even if that is astroturfing, like, you know, people, it's still being effective. And yes, there are still people who are hearing that and being like, oh, that terrible person has a point. Or what I actually think is more, a little bit more likely is that they're like, this is a really like solid issue for us and a good way for us to get other things that we want, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's so the move, and this is something we talked about when the the Dobbs opinion had leaked, and my concern was that the Democratic Party would be unprepared for defending abortion rights as an activist issue. Obviously, it's always been an activist issue, but before the rhetoric, and even Obama and even Biden uses rhetoric, was sort of like the and I use conservative in a small c sense, but like this is the status quo. It's radical to change the status quo. But when that changes, when the status quo is these, half the country has no bodily autonomy, then you need an activist position. You're suddenly on the
Yeah.
activist side, and that becomes much harder because then
I think there's a genuine fear of losing faith in institutions. Like for some people, they're like, okay, well, like they care about things, but then the ultimate thing is that they also have to preserve faith in institutions, which is why they really don't like that Emma Goldman quote about if voting changed anything, it would be illegal. And I think that, I can respect that if that's what people are into, but I think it does have to come to a point where you're like, ooh, maybe the institutions have turned rotten and are not good.
Well, and the
Let's
Republicans use the institutions to kind of inflict the fascism, right? So it's like, oh, your inherent faith in Supreme Court as an institution will allow us to do whatever we can. One of the justices' wives is a coup member, was a coup instigator, but hey, what are you going to do about it? And I think everything
here's the thing, it's not just sorry, I'm interrupting you, but it's like, it's not up to people. It's not like a Tinkerbell situation where like, if you keep believing in the Supreme Court, they'll eventually, and you keep clapping, they'll eventually become like a respectable institution. It's the job of the institutions to inspire like that trust in people. It's sort of like just knocked a thing over. It's sort of like a backwards kind of deal. It's also like the job of politicians to, convince people, not the job of people to be like quiet so that no one thinks the politician is bad.
Well, it's like with Trump, everything was he became president many ways for what happened, meaning he's immune in so many ways from any kind of legal accountability he would have faced the private citizen. Because how can you prosecute the president? That would divide the nation, as opposed to if he was Joe Average who did the same thing, it would be less of a question. And that he really desperately, because he's a damaged person, wanted the kind of support and respect that the office gave him, as opposed to, well, you need to earn this respect. Sign up, you got elected, you need to earn it. It was like an inherent sense of, oh, we need to respect the presidency, and he's the president, so we need to respect him. There was a lot of that going around, and he's been benefiting from that.
God, people really love that, don't they? On both sides. That's the only thing on both sides. That people love the like, oh well, they're the president, so now you have to respect them forever.
Well, no, I think that's Democrats.
No one on either side thinks that's the case when it's the other person.
I think Democrats did want a sense of, we need to engage with him fairly, even though he's president. And there was like the folks who weren't, and this included John Lewis actually, but John Lewis and Maxine Waters, and who was like, this guy's a crook. I'm not going to his inauguration. I'm not giving him the benefit of the trappings of all of this. Then they were looked down upon because no, you need to fatefully lose, as if it's like a tennis match. Because if you don't show up, after your baseball, if you don't show up after the other team wins and shakes their hands, that's rude and that's bad. But no, I shouldn't shake the hand of the fascist who's going to do all this terrible stuff. This is a radically bad thing. And so I think that's been one of the big challenges of like Red Party. Republicans never, like back to Clinton and others, like they've never respected the results of an election.
No, but I will say, I think that like, aside from the people who, like to do that as sort of a troll, I think as actual people, that everyone got kind of burnt on that after Bush. Like I do think that was like, just because it was so bad and it was so like kiss the ring, and the Trump people were very kiss the ring, but with Bush it was like a lot of people who didn't necessarily support him were like, well, he is the president, about things. And I think that people it was a long time ago at this point, which is weird to think about. But
isn't it scary to see a lot of that playing out in some of the rhetoric for like, it's not enough to like, it's like, okay, Robyn, it wasn't enough that you voted for Clinton in 2020. You weren't supportive enough of her, and you weren't supportive enough of Democrats now. and even talking and expressing any criticism of them helps Republicans win. Because to me, it's very much like what we experienced in the post 9/11, a very Patriot Act era
Mhm.
mentality of any criticism of this administration is inherently criticism of America. You want Bin Laden to bomb us again if you don't
Yes.
support everything Bush does. If you criticize him, we saw those Dixie Chicks and others that
Mhm.
backlash, and and a lot of it is when people kind of wandered into the Iraq War. My favorite is I'm not going to name names. This was someone had like expressed this idea that all Democrats were opposed to the Iraq War, and it's like, okay, well that's so this is what's happening, right? Like all
Well, honestly, I
they
prefer
were
that
all
to like
out with you.
2016 when they were kind of trying to like be like, the Iraq War wasn't that bad. I don't know what you're talking about.
But now it's like we all knew it was bad. Like, really, Robyn, you were there. Like they were all marching with you. Really? Like I don't think that's what happened. And it was not like
Like, all your dirty hippies. Come on.
well, that was and that was what um yeah, Matt Iglesias, who I don't agree with a lot of stuff he had said, like was like still a challenge even in 2016. The Iraq War vote was an issue for Clinton and a lot of the TARP stuff and whatever, and that was one of those weird things, like the idea that there's a lot of looking at what happens in 2016. I hate debating this, but looking at it out of the context of what had occurred, because you keep seeing where people are saying Republicans are the faithful, loyal, long-suffering spouse to their
Yeah.
leaders. And it's just not like how many Republic it's like the Black Plague in Republican leadership compared to Democratic leadership. Like you don't suffer it's to you won't make this get this reference, but it's like Darth Vader killing his minions over there. Like there's no tolerance for failure in the Republican Party, and they obviously what 2016 was as if only liberals ever said both parties are the same. That was a common argument, like in the
They
Rhino.
actually, if you like, one of the things that I've been noticing a lot lately is that the on the right in the like on the places I monitor, there's a lot of people be calling, like, oh, it's the uniparty and everything like that. So that rhetoric is really very, um, like, it's very common on both sides, and as is weirdly, like a lot of Democrats like to say, oh, the Republicans, they all agree on everything and always fall in line.
Yeah.
Guess what they say on the Republican side?
Oh yeah. Well,
They say that about us.
oh yeah. And 20 and I mean in 2016, I mean I remember Laura Ingraham dismissing like what it looked like Jeb Bush was going to win. It was like she was calling it Jeb versus Hillary. What difference does it make? And what happened in that context was you got someone like Trump who kind of in a change election rhetoric blew it up, like said, I don't support any whatever's passed. I'm not, Reagan, I didn't vote for Reagan. Who cares? I didn't, I never believed in the Iraq war, which he was lying about, but still he went out and said, and at a debate, Jeb was like, my brother kept us safe. It's an absurd statement, right? Because 9/11 happened on his watch. And oh, Trump said it like, well, 9/11 happened on your brother's watch, and his own BS of like, I would have stopped 9/11 with
Yeah.
my bare hands or whatever. But he was,
But like,
challenging Republican orthodoxy in a way that perhaps did not happen with Democratic orthodoxy on those, and you could say for good or for ill, what should have happened or what would have happened. But if you're kind of attacking the critic, whatever happened from
I just think that you have to like be aware of what the reality actually is. And I think a lot of the time people think things are like, conventional wisdom about Republicans or about like the way that they do things, and then say like, oh, well, we should do things that way as well, when they're not actually doing things that way. And I feel a little like gaslit about it, frankly.
Yeah, it's
Like,
just very weird. It's like, well, no, this is they change their leaders frequently. They have very little tolerance for success out of whatever happens. But like Rubio, for instance, was elected in 2010, 2 years into Obama's presidency, from a state Obama had won in 2008. Like Florida wasn't necessarily a hard right state at that point, and he was a junkyard dog against Obama, full
And
on.
now he's considered like, oh, he's one of the normal ones.
Oh yeah, but for us, like somehow, and I think it's worth having that debate. Like, how did that happen? Like, Manchin is a Dixiecrat; it's been there forever. I get it, but how did we, 2 years into the resistance, we get Sinema? Like, how does that happen? Like, and she's like, we should have gotten, in theory, from a state that, like that Arizona being like Florida, we would have, state is ideally shifting towards us. We would have gotten a candidate like, I'm a junkyard dog against Trump. I'm going to do whatever it takes to stop. Instead of like, how can I hug Republicans more? It's just a weird.
Well, I think part of the idea with that was, although I will say, like, Sinema did not campaign as though like her deal was that she was just going to do whatever Republicans wanted. But I think there was this idea that like, okay, well, if we're like actually more sort of neutral and we're the classy people about things, then Republicans who think that Donald Trump is wacky will come over to our side. But what actually happened was that everyone just got more wacky on that side, like collectively. Like, I think that I think there's very much like long been this idea that there are these, very normal suburban Republicans who have like blonde hair and ponytails. And that's sort of what I picture in my head. They carry Vera Bradley bags probably. And I'm sorry, I have a really big problem with Vera Bradley. It's evil. Like, and you're not like super directly racist, but like, they understand it. They wouldn't actually say it, but they are kind of racist, and they wouldn't, necessarily be mean to poor people, but they think poor people are pretty icky, and that it would be a lot better if they would just pull themselves up by their bootstraps, which they can obviously do in this world that we currently live in, because that is a thing that it is possible to do. And I think that there's like, and they're reasonable, and they can be, they also care about institutions and just want everything to be sort of remain the same forever. And I think that the idea was like appealing to them, because I'm not sure that they exist anymore in the way that like people think they do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, the whole argument of, and the whole theory of vote blue no matter who would be like, no matter what you thought of Hillary Clinton, obviously she's better than Trump or the Republicans. That's the argument. But you can't simultaneously then say, no, okay, well, we're saying that to the left, but hey, Democrats, Republicans who would support, Trump is going to give you everything on your wish list, but he's kind of mean and impolite. Vote for me. Those two things can't happen. I think people fundamentally.
Well, because I think that people actually, what I will say is I do think that people always assume that everyone sort of operates the way that they do. And I think that there are a lot of people who are, maybe voting Democratic who, feel that if they were faced with the decision between like, some like kooky radical and Jeb Bush, that they might consider Jeb Bush, because at least like, he's normal.
Mm-hmm.
He's not going to scary. He's not scary. I think he's scary, obviously, but
the poll, I guess, polling showed that Trump appeared more moderate than Clinton did. She appeared more liberal. And again, this is Matt Iglesias. Neither of us are grand supporters of his, but it was an interesting argument.
He was less wrong about Italian food than some people in his comments, I will just say.
He had said
he was wrong, but less wrong overall.
Yes, he had said basically that the choice had been made to, like, inadvertently, Sanders wound up looking more moderate because suddenly the position that Clinton and a lot of Democrats had made was like, oh, any talk of economics made you racist.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like, okay, well, what? And that was sort of, he was saying like, no, we should actually get some jobs in or whatever. And sometimes it was a response of any can
you delete those comments, because they're just like,
let me see if
horrifying again. And I always accidentally highlight them. Just if we can block that person, that would be swell. I
Yes.
can't do it with my nails, which are very pretty right now. I think we should acknowledge that.
They have the option to put the user in a timeout, and I did not.
Yeah.
I just blocked them. I don't put people in timeouts. No second chances, as the doctor said. So yeah, but that argument of like we could break up the banks, but that won't cure racism, and we could do all this, which makes people think, oh, well, this party is gonna only get me a job once racism's cured. I don't know. That seems like that's gonna be a lot of steps. Maybe I'll go ahead and so that made Sanders wind up looking more modern. He should have. And that has been an issue where even though, Clinton was in 2008 was very much about, no, we need to communicate with people in these rural areas and talk about their jobs and not talk down to them.
And she was for single payer, just putting it out there.
So a lot of that was sort of interesting. Before we close up, though, I do want to, he was talking about this ridiculous argument about chicken parm. Can you break this down very quickly? I am a fan of chicken parm, and
I love chicken parm. I make it all the time. I make a very good chicken parm. No, it was this. Okay, so so yesterday, Matt Iglesias tweets this thing up, like explaining the history of Italian food, which he very much understands, as like
he's a white
Matt Iglesias, because he understands everything. He's that guy. He knows all of the things, and so he actually did defend Italian American food. But then also, oh God, he said that it developed differently than like food in Italy because people here were so much richer. And I was like, no, not so much. Like people were pretty poor. And then there were all those people in the comments being like it was all these like not Italian, very like waspy people being like, oh, I only like the Italian food in Italy. When they have it here, it's all cheese and there's all this. It's like, I'm like, fuck you. Okay. You're just trying to let everyone know that you have enough money to go to Italy. Congratulations. You're very special. And our food is great. I like the food in Italy. I like our food. And some other asshole came out with
to their cuisines, right? You're going to adapt to certain foods and certain here's what I have access to, but it's not like we're also seeing this idea of I've seen this with Chinese as well, that somehow there's this sense of, well, they don't eat this at home. The Italians are only giving you well, they do. They're only giving you the Americans.
No, the person's comment was that Italian American cuisine evolved to suit the tastes of Anglo-German Scandinavian people who were, definitely hanging out in our neighborhoods years ago. They were just so many Scandinavian people everywhere. Everybody looked Scandinavians.
And that's just a complete misread. Like so Vivian Howard, so during the pandemic, I was watching a lot of stuff. Vivian Howard had a show called Suddenly South, and she was kind of comparing our different Southern cuisines from actually different cuisines across the nation, not implying that they're all existed solely because of Southern cuisine, but just like, oh, greens prepared a certain way has existed, which is interesting, right? Like it's sort of, so yes.
I love shit like that.
People have schnitz. There's noodles all across the globe.
Mm-hmm. We got different noodles from China.
Well, it's okay that a white lady can write about noodles. She's not culturally appropriating anything. Noodles is a thing. And so schnitzel, yes, is a German and Scandinavian type thing, but that doesn't mean that they came in and like, hey, Italian person, make me a essentially schnitzel with noodles. It was just like, no, it's just these things because it's so tasty.
Yeah.
Like,
like, I'm sorry, like there was just this whole. It was very, very classist. Like, people who are not super aware. There's like a whole like thing between northern and southern Italy, and they think we're tacky, like back in the day, they thought we were tacky. And poor and what have you, and that we had criminal head shapes. But like it was just this very, very like classist, the Italian Americans here are just, their food is not as, wonderful and healthy as the food and good as the food in Italy. And like, yeah, no, the food in Italy is good, but like also fuck you, we make the best food. And also do not accuse us of like cooking our food, God forbid, to suit the tastes of Anglo-German Scandinavians, because my God, we season it. We season it.
Tomatoes in Italy are insane. It's like a different.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean,
no, like there are great ingredients, but like it's not. I mean, the food in Italy is wonderful. I just don't think that you have to like put down like the food that we came up with here, or like come up with something nefarious about it because you think the Olive Garden is tacky. Like
yes, it's been like
I don't care. Eat some breadsticks.
It's all got a lot of obvious jokes about Olive Garden and whatever. And look, I have relatives who have eaten there, but do you eat places like that because there's not it's not like Little Italy existed and
literally zero restaurants. There was one ice cream place.
Yeah,
zero restaurants.
I'm sorry that I think that it's awesome that my dad until my mother died, took her out for dinner every Saturday night, and she wanted to go to Olive Garden. It does not make her a tacky person. It was just like they enjoyed going out. Unfortunately, my mother had a great pasta sauce recipe, and I never got it from her before she passed away because you never take advantage of those things at the time. But it was wonderful. I used to eat back in my youth. I was just ridiculous because I was just chowing down food. So she'd make this whole thing of pasta for me on Saturday. I would literally eat an entire.
If you tell me kind of like what it was and what it tastes like, I might be able to figure some of it out. I'm pretty good with the cooking, even if I'm a tacky Italian American and not, the fancy kind that lives in Europe.
Yes, well, you're just
so mad.
Italian. Well, I mean, a lot, and it's just so weird because it's kind of like, well, that stuff's so very authentic, and it's just, I think it's presented.
Also, like it was what we could do. When people came over here, they were very poor. And they came from southern Italy, which was also very poor. Which is why most of the food that we make here is expensive in restaurants, but also the cheapest shit you can possibly make at home. And will last for a very long time. That's why you make a lot of it. Also because you're Catholic and you're a Jewish family, but
time and care, right? More than
like it's less about. Yeah, it's less about we have like 80 bajillion expensive ingredients. It's about like we put the time and care into like whatever we make, even if it's not something that is going to cost a lot to make. I don't actually use that many ingredients in my cooking for the most part, except probably like bolognese has a lot, but like whatever. I don't know. I hate food snobbery. I really do. Like, I think it's just like this weird, I hate music snobbery. I hate anything where anyone's like, oh, I'm a snob. How impressive is that? Look, I hate it.
People like own up to it. It's like, no, it's a bad thing. Like you're owning up to a bad thing. This means that you are hopeless. Like you won't.
Like stop being an asshole.
No. I
just want everyone's food to be good and for them to enjoy it.
No, and I mean, I get it. I know a lot of it is tough. Also, Italian cuisine, same with French cuisine and others, is like what does happen sometimes at culinary, like people go out. So it's like, oh, it needs to be enough to justify this is our anniversary meal. So this is what. And so, and I want to be a creative celebrity chef. So I always hate the term, we've elevated this, like F you, whatever that term is. Don't use that term. I've elevated spaghetti and meatballs. Like I just want some good spaghetti and meatballs. It's fine.
Oh, like that. Were they made ravioli after Happy Meal? Like, this much food. I'm like, that helps no one. No one. This did not need to happen.
A little thing on it and whatever. And that's harder to find. I mean, I knew a lot of great hole in the wall. There was a place again almost 20 years ago in the East Village called Frank's. They had really good Italian food, and it was kind of hole in the wall type of place. But like others, it's harder to. Places in Providence has some of the best Italian food in my life there.
Hell yeah!
And but it's just sometimes it's hard. I mean, sometimes I still wish I could get a very good Florentine steak here. There's a place in Portland that apparently has a good Florentine steak. We're gonna go there, and then COVID struck, so
Yeah.
part of our party was sick, so we could not go. But I still I that's something I love. It seems like something you can kind of only get in Italy, but I just I've had some of the best sandwiches in my life in Italy. And again, it's a lot of like
Yeah.
simply done, great ingredients. The I but the food snobbery is just so weird, and the idea that Matt Iglesias is a sort of this
Like
expert.
he was the least horrible about. Like he was like, I'm writing a defense of chicken parm. I'm like, chicken parm doesn't need a defense. Like
Yes,
it's
I know.
good. It tastes good in people's faces. Like what else does it need to be? Like I don't.
Very good. I
I
mean,
hate the idea of, oh, it's not authentic. Fuck off.
there's been
Um,
like there's certainly bad chicken parmas out there, and I've
yeah.
seen these for good. There's like bad eggplant parmesan, so it was good. Though I ate
But
a lot.
most eggplant parmesan is wrong.
I'm sorry,
I will say
you don't
that
believe it's
it's they
wrong.
don't cut it thin enough. They don't cut it thin enough, and then it's like a weird texture.
That I don't like when cut really thin. I've had very good eggplant parm sandwiches during my vegetarian days. So when I was vegetarian, there was an Italian shop in Athens, Georgia, I would go to, and they had like these delicious eggplant parm sandwiches I would get during my healthy
Mhm.
days, and those were great. But yes, I mean, when you don't do it, but there's like a lot I've done it, but I've done sort of an Alison Roman recipe. It was very, very different, but it's just enough to get the idea. But you have to it's a lot of steps in doing it correctly. I've all the
Oh yeah,
respect.
no. In my like recipe, I literally like put a thing there like, and now take a glass of wine, drink the glass of wine, and then lie on the floor for 5 seconds, scream for like a few minutes, screaming, because my arm will freaking fall off. It like it is.
So that is, that's why you go out and get something that is gonna, I remember people.
No, they don't. I don't get Parmesan out. No, they don't do it right.
Well,
It
that's
was like
the
one
thing. Like,
place.
if someone did it well, that's why you'd want to go out
Yes.
because you take of the time of it. Some of the biggest issues was like Alton Brown would often have this thing about you don't need to go out to get this, make it at home. And it's like, well, your job is to cook stuff and you're well compensated. But like I have a job and I need to eat during the week. So I
Yeah.
can't like and on the weekends I gotta do chores. So I can't literally spend all day
And yeah,
making
we don't.
sauce the
Yeah.
way you do. It's hard. So my props off to anyone who can do it. So
I mean, we also. I mean, you can also like the white wine sauce I made the other day, super easy, but like we don't like this is gonna sound weird. Like I am a feminist and I am defending the existence of home ec. We should actually teach people how to cook. We should teach people how to sew. We should teach people how to do these things so that they can function and not have to like, spend a ton of money on things that they don't necessarily need to. Like I think that I think cooking is a skill that everyone, if people want to learn.
these are
Like I think
basic
it's good to learn. I think that I do think that like, you could have like radical socialist home economics where it's like learn how to fix your own things.
basic survival instincts. And in my experience, when people came in too late and like, okay, well, they'll start with cooking as this is an artistic thing to do, and then you'll do it and it's like, this is so expensive. Well, yes, because I remember I dated one lady who had this whole thing of like, we eat out too much, we spend too much money, we live in New York, I'm gonna cook a dinner, and she had this fancy recipe, and like, can you just pick this stuff up? And it was the middle of the week, so I left work around 7, and I'm go to 18 different places, had to get a unicorn horn from somewhere, and all these ingredients that she of course was only going to use once. So it's like the whole meal wound up costing like more than you would get out. Like, so to your point, the home ec thing, part of that, which took a while to learn, and if I'd paid attention to my mother, I did not, but like, oh right, we had this on Wednesday because that was what was left over from Tuesday, and then Sunday she'd make this, and I would go through this day. So a lot of that is figuring out, oh, on the day you have time, make this big meal that lands you to here.
Yeah.
Here's when you make stock with this leftover food, and then take this leftover, it can be this meal. Because if you don't do that, you just like food rots.
Okay, you end up spending a ton of money, especially if like you're like
doing this.
Yeah. And so, with certain things, you buy stuff for a particular meal and then, there's a lot of stuff that you can continue using. For the most part, I've got my staples. I get, all I got to do is like get some chicken or some, whatever, and I can, make a meal out of that. I can probably make a meal out of most things. I actually think that I should somehow monetize my ability to make pasta out of like anything, or I prefer to say macaroni, but I say pasta so people know what I'm talking about. But I do think I think it's a wonderful skill that like people are so afraid of being bad at it,
Mhm.
and they're so that they get like afraid of trying, which I think is sad because like I do think that like cooking it's something that I take joy in, and I recognize that everyone doesn't have to take joy in it, but we shouldn't be so intimidating about it, like
Exactly.
and snobby. I don't think that helps anyone.
And that includes cooking with Robyn and Steven.
Yes.
Well, we should actually have you make something during a live at one point. That would be awesome. Like if you were in.
Okay, no, I have ADHD. I have to
Oh, right.
like my brain does not my brain will not allow me to do that. I have enough trouble remembering what we're talking about.
Can you clean while cooking? Can you clean up while you're cooking? Yeah. I think that's sort of doing two things at once, though.
But like, I mean, thinking.
Oh, okay, yes, that would be harder. So, but thank you, Robyn. It was great seeing you again after 2 weeks, and
Yes.
we'll again always we need to bring Jamie back again to get us on a call up. She's always funny. So,
yeah.
Thank you, everyone, and we will see you next time.